I still remember the hum of the machines in my sleep lab, a constant, low thrum that morning. It was Tuesday. Boston was doing its usual thing outside, a dull, gray promise of an even duller day. Inside, though, it was all order. Tubes, wires, screens flashing green lines, white lines, a steady rhythm of science. That's what I did. I was Dr. Sarah Jenkins, and I dealt in objective data, in the very real, very physical processes of the human brain during the most mysterious state of all. I had Jessica's charts pulled up. She was a long-term patient, one of a growing number, reporting what she called two vivid nightmares for weeks now. Her usual complaints were, well, usual. Night terrors, sleep paralysis, the whole menu of nocturnal disturbances I'd catalogued 1,000 times. But lately, her words had carried a different weight, something in her voice, a raw edge. I scrolled through the EEG data, sipping my coffee. Black, 2 sugars, my usual. The screen glowed, the lines dancing, a chaotic symphony of neurons firing. Then I stopped. My thumb hovered over the trackpad. There it was, a spike. Not just a peak, but a jagged, aggressive burst of activity in the REM phase. It wasn't a K-complex, not a sleep spindle. It wasn't even a seizure signature, which I'd occasionally seen in extreme cases. This was something else, a sharp, almost violent blip that screamed anomaly. "What the hell is that?" I mumbled to myself. My eyes were glued to the screen. It was like a fault line had suddenly appeared on a perfectly smooth landscape. I zoomed in, then out. The spike remained, stubborn, unexplained. My mind, trained for years to categorize, to diagnose, to fix, found nothing. No corresponding pattern, no known disorder. Nothing. I felt a familiar ache at the back of my eyes, a low throb. Yeah, I was tired. Days like these, my own sleep was a distant memory. I reached down, rubbing my left wrist. No scratches there, just smooth skin. I frowned. I'd seen hundreds of these charts. Maybe it was just a glitch in the machine, a momentary flicker. Sometimes the sensors did that. I nodded, a small dismissive gesture. Probably just the sensors. A few days crawled by. The spike on Jessica's chart lingered in the back of my mind, a tiny, annoying pebble in my shoe. Then other patients started reporting similar things. Not the spikes necessarily, I hadn't rechecked every single file yet, but the symptoms. Bruises, small, random contusions appearing on their skin after particularly harrowing nightmares. One woman swore she woke up with a shallow cut on her palm, exactly where a knife had sliced her in her dream. I wrote it all down, meticulously. Stress-induced bodily reactions, I told myself. The mind was powerful. It could manifest physical symptoms, somatic responses. It was all in the books. I was in my office then, the one with the big window overlooking Newbury Street, trying to make sense of the new data. My desk was usually a fortress of order, papers stacked, pens aligned, a testament to my need for control. I got up to stretch, placing my coffee mug on the desk, my morning coffee. I always placed it precisely 2 centimeters to the right of my keyboard. It was a habit, a ritual. This morning, it was on the left, still warm. I picked it up, sniffed. Definitely coffee. And I hadn't made any for myself today. My gaze darted around the room. I'd walked in, sat down, started working. Hadn't touched the coffee maker. A cold nut tightened in my gut. I looked at the mug again. It felt foreign. Like it wasn't mine, even though it clearly was.
My initials were etched into the side. I felt a strange prickle on my skin. Just a slip of memory. Tiredness, that was it. I'd probably just forgotten I'd made it, or placed it there myself. Sometimes. Autopilot. Yeah, autopilot. I tried a small, reassuring smile, but it felt brittle. I put the mug down, exactly 2 centimeters to the right of the keyboard, just like always. I grabbed a glass of water, the clear, cold liquid tasting faintly metallic. As I passed the wall by the door, I noticed a tiny crack, a hairline fracture snaking out from the corner. I could have sworn it wasn't there yesterday. I ran a finger over it. The plaster felt rough, small, insignificant, but new. The afternoon bled into evening. The strange reports from patients kept coming in. Now it wasn't just bruises or small cuts. It was sounds. Echoes from dreams, they said.
A patient in Beacon Hill called, swearing he heard the wails of a banshee from his nightmare reverberating from his own basement. Another claimed a specific, grotesque figurine from her recurring dream kept appearing and disappearing on her bedside table. My scientific brain was screaming for rational explanations, but my notes were starting to look like entries from a folklore journal. I finally got home. My apartment, up on the top floor of a brownstone in South End, was usually my sanctuary, a place of quiet predictability. But as I opened the door, a faint, almost imperceptible film of dust seemed to coat everything. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been moved in days, which was absurd. I'd left that morning, same as always. Then I heard it, a faint creak, from upstairs, a floorboard giving under weight. I stopped dead. My building only had 3 floors. I lived on the 3rd, the top. There was no upstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic little bird trapped in a cage. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt dry. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin, reedy. Silence. A deep, thick silence that felt wrong. I stood there, listening. Nothing. Just the faint, distant drone of city traffic. I told myself it was the old pipes, or the building settling. Old buildings groan. That's just a fact. Boston buildings were ancient. I walked into the living room, my steps unnaturally light. The leather sofa, my favorite spot, felt off. It was cold, slightly damp to the touch, and yes, sticky. Like someone had spilled something sugary and it had dried. I frowned. I'd cleaned it last weekend. I was meticulous about that sort of thing. I ran my hand over the armrest, then quickly pulled it back. It felt clammy, disgusting. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Too many hours, too little sleep. My brain was clearly playing tricks on me. That was the only logical explanation. I sank onto the sofa, needing to feel the familiar give of the cushions. My clothes felt damp with sweat, clinging unpleasantly to my skin. My heart was still thumping, an almost painful rhythm. I closed my eyes, just for a second, just for a moment of peace. Then I was awake. Or I thought I was. My eyes snapped open, my body drenched in cold sweat. My breath came in ragged gasps, tearing through my throat. The nightmare was still there. A vivid, horrifying after-image burned behind my eyelids. A thing of shadows, all teeth and hunger, chasing me through my own apartment's library. My small, cozy space transformed into a gothic, labyrinthine prison. The memory was so fresh, so real, I could still feel the cold breath of it on my neck. I fumbled for the lamp beside my bed, my fingers clumsy. Click. The soft, yellow glow flooded the room, but it felt wrong. It didn't quite reach the far corner, past my bookshelf.
That spot remained stubbornly dark, an oppressive, inky blackness that seemed to absorb the light, not just reflect its absence. It was like a hole had opened in the very air, sucking the brightness in. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. The corner remained a void. Then I caught a glimpse of myself in the full-length mirror right next to the wardrobe. My reflection, usually a quick, dismissive glance, held my gaze. I blinked again, once, quickly. My reflection in the mirror, it didn't blink. It just stared back at me, wide-eyed, a fraction of a second after I had closed and opened my own eyes. My blood ran cold. This wasn't right. I stared. My reflection stared. I lifted my hand slowly, touching my face. The reflected hand moved, but with a horrifying, almost imperceptible delay. It wasn't me. It was close to me, but not quite. The hair on my arm stood on end. My breath hitched. Just as terror began to truly bloom in my chest, a voice cut through the heavy silence. "Sung angkum dikon?" "Come eat, my child." My mother, her voice. Warm, melodic, exactly as I remembered it from my childhood. It was a phantom. Impossible. My mother had died 5 years ago. My apartment. I lived alone. "Mais," I whispered, a desperate, hopeful plea escaping my lips. I didn't wait. I scrambled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor with a thud. I ran, faster than I'd run in years, down the short hallway towards the kitchen. Every scientific instinct was screaming at me to rationalize, to dismiss, to explain this away. But the sheer, overwhelming realness of her voice, it shattered my composure. I burst into the kitchen, empty.
Just like it always was. The overhead light, a harsh fluorescent, cast a sterile glow over everything. But no, not sterile. The air was thick with the cloying, sweet smell of vanilla buttercream and burning candle wax. Not from a generic scented candle. This was my 8th birthday. The specific, unmistakable aroma that had clung to my childhood home after every celebration. The same scent that had filled every corner the day I blew out my candles for being 8 years old. The kitchen looked different too. The usual white tile floor was muted, almost unsickly green. The light fixture above seemed to flicker, bathing the room in an unnatural, cold pallor. My hands were shaking. I reached out, pressing my palm against the smooth, familiar surface of the oak countertop. It was freezing and damp, a slimy, almost slick dampness that made me instantly recoil. This wasn't my kitchen. It felt like a stage set, a twisted mirror image where everything was just wrong. Panic, cold and sharp, ripped through me. I stumbled backwards, my spine hitting the doorframe with a jarring thud. This wasn't a hallucination from lack of sleep. This was something else. Something utterly, completely outside the realm of everything I knew. I had to understand. I had to find a scientific explanation for this utter breakdown of reality. Back in my bedroom, my hands trembling so violently I could barely type, I switched on my computer. I opened web browsers, searching for any reports of similar incidents, collective hallucinations, anything. The internet was a cesspool of conspiracy theories and crackpot stories, but I needed something, anything, to cling to. Nothing, just the usual nonsense. My mind kept going back to the nightmare, the library, the monster, and the chilling familiarity of my mother's voice. That smell, my 8th birthday. It was a memory.
A real, solid memory. I clicked open my old photo folder, the digital archive of my childhood. I scrolled, desperately searching for anything that felt out of place. There, a grainy video file labeled Sarah Birthday 8.mp4. My father, bless his amateur heart, had filmed everything. I clicked play. The familiar, wobbly footage began. My parents, younger, smiling. My own small, chubby face, smeared with cake. The bright, cheerful chaos of a child's birthday party. The camera panned clumsily around the living room, capturing snippets of family and friends. My heart ached, a pang of bittersweet nostalgia. Everything was normal, absolutely, perfectly normal. Until the camera, in its unsteady scan, paused for a beat. Just a moment, perhaps two, in the far corner of the room, behind the antique grandfather clock. Standing there, partially obscured by shadow, was a man. Tall, impossibly thin, dressed in a dark, old-fashioned suit. He had no face. Just a smooth, pale oval where his features should have been. He was just there, watching. My breath caught in my throat. My conscious memory held no trace of this man, none. I had never seen him before in my life. I rewound the video, played it again and again. Each time, the faceless man was there. A silent, terrifying observer in the happiest memory of my childhood. It was undeniable. He had always been there. My hands flew to my keyboard, slamming the video player shut. No, this wasn't happening. This wasn't real. My eyes darted to my physical bookshelf, full of textbooks, journals, logic. My scientific anchor. I lurched towards it, pulling out a worn, leather-bound photo album. My actual photo album. The one filled with physical prints, not digital files that could be tampered with. I flipped wildly through the pages, my fingers stumbling until I found it. The spread from my 8th birthday. My mother was holding the cake, my father's arm around her. And there I was, 8 years old, beaming at the camera. And behind me, no, next to me, his hand, long and pale, rested gently on my small shoulder. The same tall, thin man in the dark suit, faceless, but undeniably there. In my past. A primal scream tore itself from my chest. A raw, guttural sound of pure terror and disbelief. It ripped through the quiet apartment, echoing off the walls, a lonely cry swallowed by a universe that felt, suddenly, horrifyingly alien. I slammed the album shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, my body shaking uncontrollably. My mind reeled.
It had gone beyond just a glitch. It wasn't just invading the present, it was rewriting the past. My memories. How many of my memories were real? How much of my life had been altered? The thought was a sickening, dizzying plunge into an abyss. My phone, lying on my bedside table, suddenly began to vibrate. I flinched, my eyes darting to the screen. It was my mother's number. Her name, bold and clear, flashed on the screen. I didn't dare answer it. I couldn't. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to push away the image of the faceless man, the sound of my mother's voice, the smell of that damned birthday cake. But the scent was stronger now. It was everywhere, thick, sweet, cloying. It was as if the past wasn't just being rewritten, It was leaking, seeping into the present, corrupting everything. I opened my eyes, staring at the closed album, at the dark corner of my room, at the phone still buzzing. A terrifying clarity bloomed in my mind, cold and precise. This wasn't a nightmare. It was a truth being bent, distorted, made real. Still shaking, still slumped on the floor, I slowly, instinctively raised my hand to my left wrist. The place where I'd rubbed earlier, the place I'd always known to be unmarked. Under the pale, almost translucent skin, a faint outline began to pulse. A small, coiling serpent. It wasn't a bruise, it wasn't an abrasion. It was a tattoo, or something like it. It pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow in the gloom, a barely perceptible light that seemed to emanate from within me. It felt as if it had always been there, just waiting, waiting for me to see it. The room seemed to grow heavier, quieter, settling into a profound, oppressive stillness. But I could hear it, faintly, a lullaby, a soft, sinister whisper of a song. I still don't know how many days passed after that night. Time, it had started to feel elastic, stretched thin, then snapped taut without warning. All I knew was I woke up, the smell of vanilla buttercream still a faint phantom in my nostrils, that lullaby a distant, unsettling hum at the edge of my hearing. The snake on my wrist was still there, a pale, coiling outline. It felt like it had always been there, just waiting, waiting for me to see it. The room seemed to grow heavier, quieter, settling into a profound, oppressive stillness. But I could hear it, faintly, a lullaby, a soft, sinister whisper of a song. I still don't know how many days passed after that night. Time, it had started to feel elastic, stretched thin, then snapped taut without warning. All I knew was I woke up, the smell of vanilla buttercream still a faint phantom in my nostrils, that lullaby a distant, unsettling hum at the edge of my hearing. The snake on my wrist was still there, a pale, coiling outline. It felt like it had always been there, just waiting, waiting for me to finally notice it. The room seemed to grow heavier, quieter, settling into a profound, oppressive stillness. But I could hear it, faintly, a lullaby, a soft, sinister whisper of a song. I still don't know how many days passed after that night. Time, it had started to feel elastic, stretched thin, then snapped taut without warning. All I knew was I woke up, the smell of vanilla buttercream still a faint phantom in my nostrils, that lullaby a distant, unsettling hum at the edge of my hearing. The snake on my wrist was still there, a pale, coiling outline. It felt like it had always been there, just waiting, waiting for me to finally notice it. I tried to go back to normal, or what felt like normal. I needed coffee, strong, black. So, one rainy Boston morning, I found myself in a usually bustling cafe, the kind with the old exposed brick and tiny tables. People were chattering, the clatter of mugs and spoons a familiar sound. Rain lashed against the window, blurring the already gray city outside. I sat there, nursing my cup, trying to push away the memory of the faceless man, the distorted photos, the phantom key. I was just tired, I told myself, overworked. The human mind plays tricks when pushed too far. It had to be that. A man walked past my table, his umbrella dripping onto the tiled floor. He was middle-aged, had a kind of cheerful, disheveled look about him. He caught my eye, smiled brightly, a wide, almost unsettling grin. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said, his voice loud, buoyant. "Warm sun, perfect for a walk." I blinked. I looked out the window. Sheets of rain were drumming against the glass, making small rivers down the pane. The sky was an unforgiving, overcast gray. I just stared at him, my coffee growing colder in my hand. His smile didn't falter in the slightest. Then I noticed it. On his lapel, a small pin. A silver serpent, coiled, its head raised. Exactly, precisely, like the faint outline on my wrist. I felt my stomach clench. He was just trying to mess with me, I figured. A weird joke? People were strange. Yeah, just a joke. I turned back to the window, watching the rain, trying to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But later that day, the reports from my patients started rolling in, confirming my deepest, most terror-soaked suspicions. It wasn't just vague physical marks anymore. Now it was proper glitches. Like people were living inside a poorly rendered simulation. Mrs. Davies from Beacon Hill called, practically sobbing, swearing her antique porcelain doll had blinked at her. Mr. Henderson reported that his beloved golden retriever had suddenly turned completely purple for a full minute before snapping back to normal. I was in my lab, staring at Jessica's updated charts. The same Jessica from before, the one with the weird brain spikes. I was trying to focus on the numbers, the data, some kind of anchor. But my mind kept snagging. I tried to remember the name of that color, the one of grass, of trees. Green. It was green, right? But the word, it felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I knew what it looked like. I could picture it. But the name, the actual sound of green, was just gone, empty. What is the color of grass? I typed into the search bar, my fingers stiff. Google, usually so helpful, spat back a list of similar queries. Why can't I remember the name of that color? What color is between blue and yellow? Is the color green? My blood ran cold, a slow, icy seep through my veins. I wasn't the only one. Others were losing it too. The small TV screen across the lab, usually showing muted news, flickered, static, just for a second, and then an image. A clear, sharp image of a snake, coiled, head raised. Identical to the one on the cheerful man's lapel. Identical to the one on my wrist. Then it vanished, replaced by a smiling anchor woman talking about rising stock prices. I felt a pressure building in my ears, a thick, invisible wall of something pushing in from all sides. My eardrums felt stretched, tight. I tried to swallow, but my throat was painfully dry, constricted. Panic, real and sharp, began to claw its way up my throat. I grabbed my phone, fumbling to call Maria, my colleague, my friend. She answered, her voice sounding a little distant across the miles. I tried to explain everything, tried to make sense of the nonsense. The faceless man, the cake smell, the memory bending, the patience, the missing word. My voice was tight, breathless, rushing. Maria listened, patiently, too patiently. "Sarah," she said, her voice soft, reassuring, "don't worry.
Forgetting a name, it happens. We're all really stressed right now. It's a lot. And besides, she paused, a beat too long. The world still looks beautiful, even without that color, right? My heart stopped, just for a fraction of a second. Maria. She didn't know the word. She couldn't say it. It wasn't just me. It was spreading, like a disease, like a virus that infected the very fabric of language and perception. That was it. I ended the call, my hand shaking so hard the phone almost slipped. I was alone in this. No, not alone. Trapped with millions of others who were slowly, silently forgetting. Then the floor beneath me groaned, a deep rumble that shook the entire building. The lab equipment rattled, papers slid off counters. An earthquake, just a small one. I scrambled to the window, pulling aside the blinds. Outside, across the street, on the concrete facade of the office building opposite, a crack appeared. A thin, spider-webbing fracture at first, then widening, splitting, snaking upwards, like a massive, unseen hand was tearing at the very concrete. And behind that building, impossibly tall, obscuring the sky, I saw it. A shadow, a vast, formless thing, impossibly dark, darker than night itself. It loomed, a jagged outline against the gray sky, too tall, too wide to be real. And from it, a sound, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the air, shaking my teeth, my bones. I clenched my jaw, my hands pressed against my ears. But it was just a rumble, a distant thunder, right? Then I saw the birds, hundreds of them, pigeons, sparrows, gulls. They were falling from the sky, not flying, just falling, dead little bundles of feathers, hitting the pavement with soft thuds, soundless against the building's groan. The entire world was coming undone around me. The news channels exploded. Panic, unfiltered and raw, bled through every broadcast. Footage, grainy and shaky, showed things that ripped apart cities. Massive, lumbering beasts of shadow and twisted bone, clawing at skyscrapers, sending concrete and glass raining down. They were everywhere, each one different, but all horrifying. A monstrous spider, its 1,000 eyes reflecting the desperate, flickering lights of a collapsing city. A leviathan of teeth and gaping maw, emerging from the ocean, dwarfing everything. Another, a creature of pure, formless dread, seemed to dissolve everything it touched into a fine, black dust. My old textbooks, my rational world, it was all trash now. I watched a reporter, a young woman, standing in front of what used to be a grand fountain in Boston Common. Broken pieces of ornate stone lay scattered around her. Her face was pale, streaked with dust. Her voice thin, almost a whisper.
"Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her eyes wide, darting. The water is gone. There's nothing left, just black smoke." I looked out my lab window. The sky, usually a dull Boston gray, was now different. It shimmered with faint, swirling streaks of purple and dark, bruised red. Colors I'd never seen before, or never knew how to name. The sky itself was sick. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in a fine, almost translucent layer of dust. Not the gritty dust of debris, but an ancient, ethereal powder, as if they hadn't touched anything solid in years. My skin felt brittle, like old parchment. I was becoming some kind of after-image, a fading photograph. Reality wasn't just breaking, it was being rewritten, and I was becoming a ghost in its new narrative. I found myself back in my apartment. I don't even remember how I got there. My head felt heavy, throbbing behind my eyes. I walked into the kitchen, the familiar smell of vanilla buttercream still a persistent whisper. On the worn oak table, next to a stack of old bills, was a key. My key, the one to my apartment. Exactly like the one that was in my jeans pocket. Identical. This wasn't right. I pulled the key from my pocket. 2 keys, side by side. I dropped them both onto the cable, a clatter of metal. My hands trembled. I stared. One of them, the one I'd just found, it seemed to shimmer at the edges. Not quite solid, slightly translucent, like milky glass. And the wooden table beneath it, it looked denser now, more metallic, with a faint sheen. My breath hitched. In a surge of pure, desperate adrenaline, I snatched the solid key, the one from my pocket. I squeezed it, focusing all my strength, all my fear. I tried to bend it, tried to snap it. It was cold, hard steel, unyielding. I grunted, veins straining in my neck. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I let go, my hand aching. And then, as if it had simply been waiting for my grip to loosen, the key itself began to bend. Slowly, gently, like a thin, soft piece of wire. It curved, then straightened itself out again, still resting on the table, wobbly, as if its very form was just a suggestion. Everything could be anything else. Nothing was stable. My brain, my entire existence, screamed in desperate primal terror. I somehow found my way back to the cafe. It was almost empty now, just a few desperate souls huddled in corners. I tried to search for logical explanations, for scientific articles that could even begin to touch this horror. But my phone screen kept flickering, showing corrupted images, strange glyphs, then static. I sat there, sipping my now cold coffee, hoping for a moment of peace. But my mind was a churning storm. The faceless man, the monster in my dreams, the disappearing words, the crumbling world. It was all a single horrifying truth. A familiar face, across the street. It was Sarah, Maria's co-worker. She looked pale, distraught, her eyes wide and haunted. She met my gaze, then quickly looked away, pulling a thin shawl tighter around her. She didn't see me, or maybe she just didn't want to. I leaned back, closing my eyes. I could hear the wind chimes. They were bamboo, clinking gently above the counter, a soft, almost melodic sound. Then a strong gust of wind, or something, rattled the window, and the chimes went silent. But I could still hear them, clear as day, right next to my ear. Clink, clank, tick, tock, over and over. I pressed my hands to my temples. Just my mind playing tricks, I muttered. I'm tired. I just need silence. The barista, a young woman with a piercing in her nose, turned to me. Her expression was irritated, annoyed. She walked over to my table, planting her hands on the sticky surface. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice flat. "Could you please stop making that clinking noise? It's bothering the other customers."
My blood ran cold. The chimes. She heard them too. But I wasn't making a sound. It was external. It was real. And yet she was directing it at me. This wasn't just a shared hallucination. This was manipulation. The world was getting worse. Everywhere, images of sprawling, impossible ruins. Cities were being ripped apart, not by bombs or earthquakes, but by things that defy logic. Things that grew from the shadows, from the collective surging terror of a planet full of people who couldn't sleep. I stumbled out of the cafe, driven by some primal need for answers. I needed to see something concrete, a book, a text.
I ended up, somehow, at the old public library downtown. It was mostly empty, the silence heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the distant sounds of sirens. I walked past the children's section, past the history aisle. I stopped. I had a specific fear from childhood. Those porcelain dolls. The glass eyes that seemed to follow you. I always hated them. I used to run past any display in a store. I headed for the science fiction section, hoping for some fantastical explanation, some far-fetched theory that might make this real. But as I turned the corner, my eyes scanned the shelves. All of them. Every single book, row after row, was about dolls. The grand history of porcelain dolls. Doll repair and the art of the glass eye. Making your own creepy doll. My breath hitched. Every exit, every path, it all led to my own personal terror. A tremor, stronger this time, shook the building. Dust rained down from the high ceilings. I looked out the large arched window. The city outside seemed to be warping. Buildings blurred at the edges. Their perfect lines rippled like heat haze over asphalt. And then there it was again. Taller now, more defined. A towering silhouette of pure, consuming shadow. Its impossible form looming behind the shattered facades of skyscrapers. It wasn't moving, but it was growing, expanding. And the roar, this time it was louder. A sound that tore at the very fabric of my being, filling the air with a deep, crushing pressure. And despite the musty, old book smell of the library, I could also smell something else. Damp earth, rotting leaves, the sharp, metallic scent of blood. I couldn't do this alone. I knew it. The rationalist within me was dead, buried under layers of unspeakable horror. I needed others. Others who had seen what I had seen. Others who had experienced the glitches, felt the fear, lost their memories of colors long before I had. I needed people who weren't trying to rationalize it away. I called the numbers of some of my former patients who had reported the strangest things. People who had been dismissed, ridiculed, even institutionalized. This wasn't a time for scientific skepticism. This was a time for desperate collaboration. We found each other eventually, a motley crew of the traumatized, the disbelieving, the utterly broken. An old man who swore his dead wife's face appeared in his morning coffee. A teenage girl whose smartphone screen perpetually showed images of a rotting skeletal hand reaching out. A former trauma surgeon who couldn't stop seeing strange symbols carved into his own skin. We met in secret, hidden in the labyrinthine underbelly of a deserted subway system in the outer boroughs. Our faces grim, our eyes haunted. We were few, perhaps the only ones left tethered, however tenuously, to what had once been reality. And we shared one thing. A conviction that this wasn't random. This was connected. This was a thing. Someone, the old man, mentioned an abandoned military research facility deep in the forests of Maine. Old rumors said it had experimented with perception, with dreams, with things the government swore never existed. An old, classified project. It was a shot in the dark, a desperate gamble, but we had nothing left to lose. So we piled into a battered old pickup truck that still miraculously ran and drove north, away from the collapsing cities into the rising nightmare. The facility was a hulking concrete monstrosity, half swallowed by overgrown trees and tangled vines. It reeked of stale air and something metallic. We found our way to the sublevels, a warren of dark, echoing corridors. Our flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing peeling paint, rusted pipes, and strange, archaic symbols daubed on the walls. We found it, after hours of searching, a control room, deep underground. Dust-covered terminals, flickering CRTs, and one, miraculously, was still active. The screen glowed with an eerie green light. It displayed what looked like a massive, swirling mass of data. Waves, brain waves. Not just one person's, not just a city's, but global, a composite. And as I stared at it, my breath hitched. The wave patterns weren't random. They were forming an image. A colossal, grotesque shape that slowly, sickeningly, became clearer. A monstrous, multi-limbed creature, its jagged outline like a corrupted mirror of humanity's deepest fears. It was the collective unconscious, rendered visible, materialized.